ADHD and Autism. How would you describe the conflicting characteristics?
Order and anarchy living together in a single person. So many different things that you're organized at, but yet you're so forgetful about the things of daily life.
Dr. Khurram Sadiq,
a neurodevelopmental psychiatrist, the author of Explaining AuDHD.
He's the world's leading expert in ADHD,
whose TED Talks have been viewed over 1 million times.
In a way, society is telling us that females have to be shy, polite, have to speak in a certain way. It leads to a lot of anxiety, leads to a lot of depression, eating disorder, self-harming behaviors, because they're unable to express themselves. If they express themselves, they will be different. They'll be called broken.
What do you think neurodivergent people are looking for from the world?
I think from the world, they need to be listened to. They're telling you something different. It does not mean that it's bad, because the world is petrified of anybody coming up with new idea.
This episode is dedicated to anyone who leaves the house with 2% phone battery because they forgot to charge it. Whenever I interview people who have dedicated their life to better understanding the nuances of different neurodevelopmental conditions, I always question where their motivation comes from.
Yeah.
Is there a story there that might add colour to our listeners in their understanding of where your drive comes from?
Yeah, there are lots of stories, but again, one story that kind of sticks out of the lot is that of my father. Again, I started to realize 6 months before his demise and before his untimely death that he was a neurodivergent, a person who was misunderstood, a genius, could speak for hours about the things that he loved. Yet he was so impulsive about making decisions, like agreeing to have the properties, paying people money for houses that he has not even signed for 80% of the time. And then there have been frauds, and we had to go after those people to get those things done. It was a series of those episodes, and people would say, oh, he has got personality disorder, because he would not get on with a lot of people. He would switch a lot from being very precise, very detailed, to being very flippy. You would be walking around kind of eggshells around him at times, but he had a wicked sense of humor. He had an amazing storytelling, conceptually, and it was then when I was grieving for my father, I realized like what an amazing brain he had, which we didn't realize, which I miss still so much, talking to him on so many things that I could have done only if I'd known it earlier, only I had those reflections. But unfortunately, we live in a world where we reflect after somebody's gone. And he was part of the grieving process that I had. And after his death, we kind of came to realize how much he was holding together, being a senior citizen, having heart condition, diabetes, leg ulcers, and yet he would get up early in the morning, sit outside, talk to people. He was into plants. He would not even decorate his own house, our own house, with plants, but he would give the plants to neighbors, and he would take care of them. So the whole street was looking really flowery, and it was very green. He knew everybody who would pass by, and then it made me think that I should do something about it. I'd seen people like him, and I had been doing autism and ADHD assessment. But again, when you're so much close to something, because I've got ADHD, I've got autism and ADHD, and it's slightly different from my father, but it was a realization that I'd seen people like him, I'd seen people like me, and I'm very similar to him in so many different ways, and I'm so much different in so many different ways to him. But I think whatever is happening, it is because of my father, that he gave me that thought process. And his death and his grieving process was because of which I'm here.
It's a truly remarkable, moving story. And you listen to it, and you can quite quickly get a sense of where your passion and motivation comes to create this understanding.
Yes.
Your father sounds like a brilliant man. The link between ADHD and autism, the dual, living with both. We've had guests on the show who have the dual diagnosis of ADHD, and one particular guest, Jay Beach, stands out, and he said it's like having two siblings inside your head that are constantly pulling in different directions. How would you describe the conflicting characteristics of ADHD and autism?
I would describe exactly the same way I did in my TEDx talk, that it's order and anarchy living together in a single person. There's so many different things that you're organized at, but yet you're so forgetful about the things of daily lives. You lose things, you misplace things, but some of your organization, like your bookshelf, is immaculate with very much order, and even somebody moves it, you will know that it has been moved. You can be very attention to detail, but having lack of attention at the same time. You can be very disorganized and you can be very organized at the same time. You can be present and you can be absent at the same time. It is unbelievable how it happens. But again, I believe that there's a natural equilibrium that holds it together. AuDHD, as the colloquial term which is used by the neurodivergent community, and which is becoming more popular now, like it's the intertwining is about 60 to 70%. We could not diagnose people with autism and ADHD together till 2013. Before that, we could actually diagnose one condition or the other. And it has become a quote of mine that I see autism as a parent to ADHD. Like, it does not let it be too anarchic or too disorganized. Whereas ADHD is like a friend to autism that does not let it become too recluse. So the AuDHD presentations are completely different to pure ADHD or a pure autistic person in so many different ways. And again, for me, seeing people, talking to people, because now I've become, it has become moments in my preclinical settings that the moment they start talking about something, I know that there's something underlying. For example, if it is autistic, then I can see the ADHD. And if it is ADHD, then I can see the autism underlying. So based on that, for me, there are three kinds of presentation. One where is autism prominent, and you try to find ADHD underneath, or incidentally come across ADHD. And then there's ADHD prominent AuDHD, where ADHD symptoms are prominent and completely masking the autism features. And thirdly, which is variable, where they don't know which one is shifting. It's kind of seesawing all the time. And because of these presentations, people have not come forward to ask for another assessment. I have seen so many different people who had delayed their assessments for years. There's one person for decades, 3 decades, she did not do that because she thought, how can she be asking for ADHD assessment when she's organized in certain aspect of her life? And then she did not ask for an autism assessment, that how can she be disorganized and be autistic at the same time? This is a lot of confusion. And only now that we are learning more about autism and ADHD separately, now there comes another intertwining, another light bulb moment where they're kind of intertwined and they're kind of living in. And it is difficult for a lot of people, including professionals, to see that because they're not trained. Eyes can't see what the mind does not know. You have to educate people in order for them to see that. This is how I see it.
It almost sounds like a mind full of contradictions, pulling in different directions. But I guess by the sounds of that, sometimes they can be quite complementary contradictions. I've had guests on who have said that if they are trying to do something and they're just ADHD, pure ADHD, the thing that helps them is that they find the yin to their yang. Somebody who has perhaps contrasting traits that picks up their shortfalls and has strengths where their weaknesses lie, so they work well together. I guess if you have AuDHD, can you sometimes be your own yin to your own yang?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think, for example, I've seen so many people with ADHD who are super organized. And people come to me and said, how can they be ADHD? And there can be two explanations around it. One explanation is that ADHD is they're so distraught by the ADHD that they develop mechanisms and their scaffoldings. But that scaffolding, they take a long time to develop, to understand. Or they can have underlying autism, which is a natural inclination towards order and organization. If that is the case, one is going to be egosyntonic, which is kind of with their own thought process. It comes natural to them, which happens in autism. And then other would be ego dystonic, which is against their nature. And it comes with a lot of struggle and stress, and when they become organized. And the difference between two is something happens as a result of that, and the system shatters. Autistic people will be distraught, but then they will get back into it very quickly, and they will develop that mechanisms again. Whereas for ADHD, it takes sometimes years to do that, because they will not have the strength to do that. So, as you said, yin and yang, yes, they kind of complement each other in so many different ways. And again, we hear a lot about overlapping. We hear when people, like, one of the moment where I get really annoyed is when people say, I'm not able to differentiate what autism and ADHD is. I said, how can you not? They said, yeah, but then they don't have attention span. They have inattention in both. I said, no, if you divide attention span, attention can be divided into 5 or 6 different components, which I've addressed in the book. And indifference can come across as inattention as well. With autistic people, when they're indifferent, they don't want to do anything, they will not do it. You cannot say that it is inattention, because they're not interested, they're not doing it, they're not putting any effort into that. Whereas for ADHD, they will start to put an effort, they will start to manage it, but it is unmanageable to the extent that they will get distracted and sidetracked and move from one thing to another. There are so many different explanations about different features that they present, which comes across as overlapping, but that is not the case.
It's fascinating. I mean, the impulsivity of ADHD, you can start something quite easily.
Yes.
Probably before you even had a moment or any time to consider whether it's a good fit for you or not. And often it won't be, because you're just jumping on loads of things. And the ones that aren't a good fit, I guess you'll quit. Whereas the autistic person might be more considered in those early stages.
Yeah. And they're more consistent. For example, they pick on something and they will probably carry on for the rest of their life till they get bored, till they know that there isn't any much fun in that anymore. Because they extract a lot of fun out of it. A happiness. They feel happy. They feel excited about it. Whereas for ADHD, it's a lot of dopamine hitting. They will see someone. Like, I remember myself being a child and watching a lot of Bollywood movies, and every time there was a lawyer or a police inspector or something like that, I would like to be that. And I would start working towards it, and I started to learn more about it. It was a dopamine hitting. We lack stimulation, and we need stimulation by something. It can be hobby, it can be food, it can be shopping, it can be gambling, it can be so many different things. So dopamine shots, you require it, and hence you do it. Once the novelty is gone and the dopamine is not getting released, because your frontal brain tends to know that it was because of that, and it stops it from releasing, and hence you know that you're not really interested, and then you find something else to do that. Whereas with autism, it is a completely different thing. The obsessions that people say, which I do not agree with, is a word, because there's a negative connotation to that. But preoccupation or something they are deeply enthusiastic about, they'll be the masters on that. In that, they will have an expert. I remember somebody coming in when I was doing a clinic in Manchester, 2011. It was an ADHD assessment, and person probably did have an underlying autism, and started looking at the board. I said, is it asbestos? In the next half an hour, he was telling me about asbestos like an expert, and he had learned it a few weeks ago because he wanted to know about the poisoning side of it. This is how good they can become. They have the mastery that comes with it and excitement that comes with it. It's not for dopamine hitting, but it is for their own comfort, and it gives them harmony and tranquility. And they find some grounding and solace doing those activities.
I know, having spoken to people in the ADHD community, there's a lot of shame and low self-esteem when they go through their life undiagnosed and they don't know why. They abandon lots of projects, relationships fail, and then they get a diagnosis later in life and they look back and lots make sense, but so much damage has been caused. What are the consequences of having undiagnosed AuDHD, do you think? And how can that manifest into somebody when they're an adult?
I think it's with AuDHD. I think again we have to understand that with AuDHD there are more coping mechanism and defense mechanisms than it is for pure autism and pure ADHD, because they bank on each other for a lot of things, and hence you see a lot of AuDHD who would not get into drugs and who would not get into trouble with the law, police, or criminal justice system. It is because their autism is on the side of caution, where it is not allowing them to have that risk taking. So for undiagnosed AuDHD, it's a sigh of relief, and they try and they understand it better. And once they know that they're both components there, I've seen a lot of people whose ADHD mask autism and autism mask their ADHD, that they still have unfulfilled answers because it explains one side of things, not the other side of things. And just like a diagnosis of autism or a diagnosis of ADHD, many a times they just burst into tears. They're very emotional about it. A lot of the times, like the oldest person I've seen was around 78 years of age. And he came with his wife, and wife wanted answers for everything that has been happening all his life. And there were different diagnoses that did not explain him at all. He'd been on different medication, but once I started doing the assessment, started explaining things, it fits it well. And again, I saw them again after a few months' time, and he had developed some insight into that. He knew the answers, and he was at peace with those answers. So with AuDHD, it's a very different experience as compared to ADHD, because ADHD, a lot of damage is done, not just because of ADHD, but because of impulsivity that happens as part of ADHD. They get into trouble. But answers always leads to reflection. The reflections leads to insight, and insight leads to change in behaviors in a lot of people. And that's exactly what we see in undiagnosed AuDHD who are diagnosed at a later age.
No, your phone isn't solely to watch brilliant new episodes of ADHD Chatter. You can also download helpful apps on it too, like Tiimo app. Tiimo app is a perfectly tailored app designed specifically to help improve your organization. It's something I use every day to make my busy schedule manageable, and it works like a charm. Organizing a podcast, writing books, taking meetings, and running errands is so much to manage, you can end up getting overwhelmed and forgetting things. That is, if it weren't for the Tiimo app. And this is how. Tiimo is designed specifically to hack the neurodivergent way of thinking. We have a brain that might struggle with time agnosia, object permanence, memory cognitive load, task initiation anxiety, or procrastination. All things I also fall victim to. That is the ad read halftime whistle. Just a little more to go. The award-winning Tiimo app is the perfect life hacking tool to help your time management and kick you up the bum when you need it most. If you want to stay ahead of the competition, then the visual planning Tiimo app is specifically designed to help your structuring, organizing, focusing, and goal setting. It has a visual timer providing a tangible and visual representation of time to help users pace themselves so you never miss a deadline ever again. It also has an efficient lock screen reminder service to alert those of you who are very out of sight, out of mind, with your chores and afraid you might forget them. It brilliantly centers all of your tasks in one place to streamline your overflowing schedules and make them much more digestible and a lot less intimidating. And for those who find big tasks too overwhelming to even start, Tiimo breaks them down into more manageable subtasks to get the ball rolling. And if you think Tiimo won't improve your life, you're wrong. Without their sponsorship, we'd not be able to survive as a podcast. So in some ways, they already are. Back to the interview. I was watching one of your brilliant TED Talks. You start off by referring to a naughty child crying outside of a classroom. So my question is, what is a naughty child in this context? And why might that child be misunderstood as one?
Because the whole scenario starts with a girl standing outside the classroom. crying inconsolably. And the perception is that she has been given some punishment because she has been naughty. That's why she had been standing outside the classroom. And the reality was that she didn't want to go into the classroom. So a lot of passers-by would have this perception that that's a naughty girl. When I was writing that, I wanted to bring a lot of stereotypes in a very short hook. A child, female, a girl. And then naughtiness is usually a stereotype around people with neurodivergence at a very young age. And you would not believe it that as I finished and came to the back and then to the front, during the break of a man in his late 30s came to me and shook my hand and said, I cried for the first few minutes because what you described was my daughter. She's 6. So that was my thing, to kind of look at the stereotypes and kind of entice one mind that this is not the case. Looking at a lot of stereotypes. I did not use deliberately a male. I did not depict that as to be somebody running around, moving around, or engulfed in their own world. I wanted to really address the stereotype. And the reason was because that girl was having a lot of sensory overload in the classroom because of the noises, because of the sounds, because of people coming near her, the smells, different people. And hence, so that was my reason for showing that stereotype earlier in the TEDx.
It's a topic close to my heart. I had a very anxious time at school. Looking back, I think the school could have done a lot more. I speak to a lot of parents in the community now who have kids. Lots of them are unfortunately deciding to take their child out of the school system and home educate their children because they're so concerned with the levels of anxiety in their child, because there's sometimes a lack of awareness, lack of funding. From speaking to your patients, do you think the current educational system is set up to accommodate neurodivergent conditions?
Okay. I think that the education system is crap. Imagine, like the analogy I give, for example, you go out and you buy, you're preparing a meal for yourself. You buy spaghettis, you buy pasta sauce, meatballs. So it's evident you're making spaghetti bolognese, right? How do you expect these ingredients to turn into a biryani? Cannot. Exactly, this is what we're doing. We are generalizing everybody's strength, every child's strength, and we expecting the same results. I come from Pakistan. When I was growing up, even now, either you could be an engineer or a doctor. There was no third choice. Teacher was when you are unsuccessful in every field of life, you become a teacher. This is how bad it was. And still, now we have got IT and MBA, so you have those 4 or 5 things. But it's the expectation of what a child could be. I know that a relative of mine wanted his child to be a doctor. Child was an amazing writer, writing 50,000, 60,000 words of fan fiction each time that he would learn something, and he was getting a lot of traction because of that. Even Amazon came to him and asked him to write something, and he was writing a book. I went to the person and said, look, that's not his strength. He cannot be a doctor, but he can be an amazing writer. I said, but what will that give him? I said, that will give him a lot of satisfaction, and he will excel in his field that he enjoys. A lot of troubles. And then eventually he got into creative writing and IR and journalism. Outshone everybody, literally. The dean's writing to the father about the progress that he has made, and an amazing, he's on top of the class, getting scholarships now. So that's the thing. We expect a system that is conducive for everybody. That is not. We don't understand it. We don't understand the neurodivergence. We want people to stand in straight lines and not move. If somebody is moving, then that's not right. I remember a patient saying to me, and that was one of the most important moments of my life. And I was telling her about things, and she turned around and said, Khurram, normal people do not like different. Gave me goosebumps straight away. That is the case. You're out of line, you're not following something, all of a sudden you're not compassionate, you're not paying attention, you're distracted. As a matter of fact, I think there's an amazing TED talk done by Sir Robinson. He's a scholar who moved to America. He's deceased now. It's called How Schools Kill Creativity. I completely agree with that. I think there's so much we can do with education. There's so much we learn from other cultures. For example, Japanese, till 6 years of age or 7 years of age, in schools, they don't learn anything education-wise. They learn the life skills. They learn how to cut vegetable, how to clean the room, how to be tidy, so they're learning a lot of social skills that here are taught through SEN teachers when they find somebody who's neurodivergent. So imagine if these skills are taught to people irrespective of whether they are neurotypical or neurodivergent. It's embracing their differences and teaching them something that is going to be helpful. That covers a lot of things. It gives a lot of food to your brain to think about. And for youngsters, till the age of 5, your brain is growing so much. And after that, it starts to prune and in different directions. And if you miss those critical time periods, then with the brain, the premise is you use it or you lose it. And hence we see a lot of problems, a lot of behavioral issues with children. So in short, as you said, our system, and again, whether it's developing countries or developed countries, apart from a few Scandinavian countries and Japan, I don't think that they're conducive at all. They're not looking at the strengths. They're not looking at the strength-based system.
Is it literally trying to hammer in a circular peg into a square hole?
Absolutely.
And the more you hammer it in and the more it doesn't go in, the more that child is just going to feel like it doesn't belong.
Absolutely.
And it's broken, and it's going to reinforce that feeling of being different. It's incredibly personal to me because I've shared this story before. I felt very different at school. I had my first anxiety attack in a classroom. At break time, I kept myself to myself. I disappeared to the library. I wasn't really very sociable. I very much ostracized myself because I was quite fearful of integrating with everyone else who I considered to be normal. So I'm fascinated. What do you think is the effect of feeling ostracized can have on a child in the school system?
And exactly, and it's not just the school system. It's where the families don't understand the child as well, and they push child to do better, and actually not understanding what the underlying issues are. I can give you one example. Have you heard of Romanian orphans? Have you heard of those?
No.
So it's in Romania. There came a time when the government thought that if they increase the birth rate and the population increases, it will be synergetic to economic growth. And there was a fine of people who were not having more than a certain number of children. The birth rate increased and they had children. The problem was that they were unable to sustain it. They could not afford the children. Hence, they started dropping the children or leaving the children outside hospitals, orphanages, and those children were everywhere. Till one American journalist, he found out about those Romanian orphans. And he found them in the worst state possible. So they were abused, physically abused, emotionally abused in every possible way. And finally, when he agreed the government to kind of intervene, they put them in nice houses with foster care available, but they noticed that they were very robotic, very mechanical in the way they used to do things, and emotion was devoid. Initially, they thought that they might be autistic or they might have underlying condition, learning disability. What they noticed was that when somebody that let's do a scan. And instead of the temporal lobes here and the frontal lobe hairs, black holes, means that those parts of the brain had not developed at all because they were not given the right care, right amount of care, the right amount of warmth. They could do things. They were very motor in following orders and do things, but again, they were not able to feel the warmth, empathy. And it was not that they were autistic. It was because the brain did not develop in that. So if you do not care about the child, if you exclude them, if you don't understand them, you ridicule them, it has consequences, not just emotional, just not behavioral. It is biological as well. It impacts on your brain development at a very young age. And I think it scares me to that, thinking about it, how they must have gone through. And exactly what we do here is we don't do it to that extent, but we do it to the extent that they are stressed. The cortisol levels goes up, the stress threshold decreases. To be able to manage things become very difficult for them. The amygdala, which is the primitive side of the brain, which is responsible for developing stress, the hippocampus, which is part of it, which is about memories, that becomes very deficient. That grows in a very asynchronous way. The frontal lobe development is hampered. Plus, at the same time, as a result of all those changes that are happening at a very young age, they drop out. They don't learn a lot from school. They get involved in different kind of activities, and they're very much dependent on other people. So this is the outcome of somebody when we exclude them like this without knowing what is going on with them.
Those children that were sadly neglected and they missed out on that fundamentally important part of that interaction with adults, and therefore they felt neglected. How does that transfer into behavior as an adult?
A lot of anxiety, a lot of depression, a lot of personality issues, a lot of behavioral issues, a lot of inability to manage the stress. Their response to stressful situation become very different. They panic in a lot of situations. So, and it leads to a lot of manifestation of mental health issues, depression, anxiety, personality disorder, bipolar disorder. It can lead to schizophrenia because stress is a killer at the end of the day. Stress leads to a lot of physical health and mental health issues.
If you are someone who's missed out on that fundamentally important part of your childhood and you've lacked that intimate connection which has enabled you to learn how to communicate, other people around them, is it possible to spot someone who is unable to communicate their wants and needs because they are struggling with the language?
Yeah, it can happen. I'll start with giving an example of a book. There's a book written by a Japanese child when he was 11 years of age, The Reason I Jump. And till a journalist from an English-speaking country, I don't know whether it's America or whether it was England, they identified that and they published it into different languages, and it was amazingly written. This was 11 years old, nonverbal boy who was later diagnosed to be autism, and he was autistic. And he wrote why he does different things, why he stims, why he doesn't make eye contact, why he behaves in a certain manner in different situations. And it was, if you read that book, it's a revelation in its own, how an 11-year boy can do that and write those things. Very much attention to detail. If you look at communication, how much your voice makes 7% of the communication bit. I think the rest of 30% is more about the tone and how you articulate that language. The rest of it, almost 60%, is the nonverbal communication. So just because a person is not speaking, it does not mean that you cannot pick up those things. You have to be observant. You have to look at the patterns. you look at the body language, the facial expressions, and you connect it with different situations. Then you look at the behaviors, observing them, what kind of behaviors, whether it's stimming, whether it is restless leg or bouncy leg, or whether there's a repetition of behavior, a repetition of how they eat, how they watch things, read things, wear things, connection with people. So if you bring all of it into together, like the good thing about psychiatric training is the first thing that they teach us is what is called mental state examination. It's not what you are listening, it's what you are observing. So you're making notes, but the rest of mental state examination is your observation, how it is connected to that person. And which gives us a lever as to kind of connect those words with the behaviors. Or if there are no words, you can say a lot of things just looking at a person, just observing the person. People who have got autism, they're not very good at picking cues, social cues. So what they do, a lot of them, they go into that overthink mode. They learn about it by using different kind of mediums, videos, books. And then they start spotting people. They go to areas where they can see things, so that if they're in a situation, they're able to pick up things. A lot of the times, they can overthink about things, situation, but just by observing people, you can read a lot of pattern. Being my autistic mind, I have predicted things before it actually happened in my own life. They turn out to be true just because I picked on something which nobody else was able to pick. It's just changing from how you eat from your right hand to left hand, or something on those lines. Or you're seeing a person all of a sudden, because I'm clumsy, I drop something, and I saw the person respond in a very different way. And then it happened again because I've got dyspraxia as well. And it happened again. And then that changed my interrogation, my approach towards asking questions. So there's a lot of things that you can do without hearing the words. It's about seeing the person, observing the person, how meticulous you are in observing those different scenarios in different scenarios. It gives you a lot of information.
I've heard that 7% statistic before, that only 7% of communication is verbal, the actual words that come out of our mouth.
Yes.
I'm convinced that people with neurodivergent conditions are better at spotting that 93%, the other stuff,
Yes.
the stuff that isn't spoken. It's you alluded to, it's the little extras, the slight changes in tone of voice, the mannerisms, the micro facial expressions that a lot of people miss, I think.
Yes.
If someone walks into a room and their footsteps are heavier than they were 5 minutes ago, you can sense that they're in a bad mood and something's annoyed them. Or that they hate you for some reason. The awareness piece is the keystone of all of this. Everything that this show is about, having that awareness is fundamentally the foundation that everything else is built on. There's so many how to hack your ADHD, how to manage it, all of these things. Sure, they help, but really the foundation is the awareness. It can go so much to alleviate a lot of the shame, anxiety that come with not understanding why you behave in certain ways. That awareness piece can be life-saving. It can be relationship-saving. It can stop you from getting into that relationship that probably isn't good for you, or starting that job that isn't a fit with your intrinsic motivations. A general question, but from your perspective, is there a beauty in difference or being different?
Beautiful. Difference is beautiful. I was, as I said, our team is quite neurodivergent. So one of the staff members brought some cutlery. And when you expect cutlery, because we are missing some, you expect it to be silver or gold. Mostly silver, sometimes gold. I looked at it, I was like, it's beautiful. It was from one of the stores and it was black. It was the first time I've seen a black cutlery, black spoon, black fork, black knife. Like, oh my God, it is so good. It is different from what we normally see. Plus, it is so appealing and it stands out. The difference, how difference is different in different mindsets, different in how you're brought up in a different culture, learning different things. Imagine bringing it all together. It gives different perspectives. It gives a different angle to a problem that you're looking at. It gives a different thought process to it. It gives a different shape. You all come together, you learn from each other so much about the culture, about where you come from, about the food that you have. Even coming from different cities, like from London and Manchester, there's so much differences in between, or Newcastle and London, or Edinburgh and Manchester. So learning about those things is so much important, and that brings out embracing it. Like again, we are human race. We have got different ways of living, and we come from different part of the world. We vibe differently, but once we bring the vibe together, it creates something very amazing, and that's how I see it. And that's the same about neurodivergence. You have people who are neurotypicals, and then you have got people who are autistic, who are quirky. You have people with ADHD, amazing creativity, energy. You have got people with dyspraxia, dyslexia. They have their own strengths that bring to the table. You combine it together, you'll be able to sort out problems. A lot of solution. I believe that incorporating neurodivergent into workflows will solve a lot of problem, because neurodivergent brain is about problem solving. There's a problem, there has to be a solution. When I started in my current job, because the whole focus is about waiting lists, and you must have heard about it, that the waiting lists are long, like in some places it's decades. And I had a plan that I came out with, and I've been writing it for a very long time. And it is difficult to convince people when it's not been done, because people will think that you're mad coming up with this idea, even tackling a problem that has already been there. And the first thing I heard was, we have to look at it. It's a national issue. I said, might be a national issue, but for us, it's a local issue, and we can solve it. We got together and we have decreased the waiting lists. And this is how neurodivergent brain works. Like 80% of neurodivergent team, 20% of neurotypicals. And we have done things that nobody had imagined that they could do in a 2 years' time. And this is difference when you work with two different sets of people, learning from each other, always motivating each other, supporting each other, and knowing about each other. That makes a hell of a difference.
The connection to problem solving has always fascinated me. It's ADHD people seem to be brilliant at problem solving, and I'm convinced it's because we've had to solve problems to survive and to sort of get over the wave of criticisms and feeling different. So we've had to carve out our own unique solutions to the challenges that we've faced in our life. I'm 100% with you in the workplace as well. I think a diverse pool of talent is always going to be a bonus to any company. Different brains thinking differently, thinking at things in a different way with different solutions is always going to be a bonus.
Absolutely.
I want to talk about the word spectrum.
Yeah.
It's a word that I hear a lot. What is a spectrum? And why are neurodivergents measured on a spectrum?
Okay. Now, before I go into spectrum, I picked on something about survival when you mentioned survival. ADHD and autism are neurodevelopmental conditions. These conditions have existed as long as the human race has existed. There's an evolutionary aspect to it. There's a theory which is called, hypothesis which is called gene environmental mismatch. That's what it's called. Which it is said that the genes environment has changed very quickly, from hunter society to agrarian society to industrialist, and then we went into a kind of a world where there's social media, and now we're entering a world of artificial intelligence. It has changed at a massive pace, the environment, whereas the genes have not been able to catch up to be able to mutate that effectively. But those skills that we're talking about, those quirks that we're talking about, that used to be a survival toolkit for us. We are not able to get distracted, if we're not able to smell things the way we did at that time, or to be able to hear things in an amplified way, if we were not able to make a decision, split-second decision in crisis situation, we would not have survived that terrain. Coexisting or cohabiting with wild animals, our race would have obliterated. And this is a new field of psychiatry called evolutionary psychiatry. They're looking into that. So just because these features have become redundant, because we have become more stagnant and in our lifestyles, it does not mean that they cannot be applied anywhere else. And that's why I say ADHD is not about taking medication. It is about finding the right thing where you can accommodate yourself and you don't have to take medication at times in order to do that. And same is the case with autism as well. Put an ADHD person into an admin job, disaster is a recipe for disaster. You can put them into a situation where it's enthralling, it's riveting for them, they will excel in those situations. And hence, a lot of ADHDs, they do well in complex situations and in difficult jobs. Whereas if you put them into mundane, normal kind of a job, which is easygoing, consequences for them will be disastrous.
The evolutionary piece is fascinating. Do you think RSD, rejection sensitive dysphoria, is a part of that equation? Is there a scenario where a heightened sensitivity to criticism could be an advantage in the wild?
I think, I'm not sure about the wild, but definitely the RSD has been in the making. Imagine an ADHD who has seen all those failures and all that ridicule and always been told that they're not good enough, always been compared to others. And they come across and always making mistakes and not doing anything right. This is years of ridicule that they have borne. And out of that, what emerges is that they become very sensitive to it. They won't do it. If they do it, if something goes wrong, the impact of that rejection stays for a longer period of time because they are anticipating it. And hence, it becomes ingrained as part of them. So for me, that's the rejection sensitivity that has built up over a period of time. RSD is not the same in every ADHD or everybody who's got autism spectrum condition. It's very much different. And it is because how they've been brought up, which environment they were in. And it changes from person to person.
A lot of people I speak to, they report getting obsessed with things, a new job, or a new hobby, or even a person, hyper focus on a particular thing. And with that, they report a lot of shame comes with that because they know that the obsession doesn't always last. And they can take steps and action things to make that thing or person a part of their life. And then they move on and that person falls out of there now. It ceases to exist and they move, and the ADHD moves on with their life. But because of that, there is some shame.
Yeah.
Do you think being obsessed with something should be a shameful trait?
Again, when you say about obsession, I do not agree with that word. It's a very negative word. It can be preoccupation, or it can be something they're passionate about. It happens both in autism and ADHD. In ADHD, it lasts for a shorter period of time. And they do not go to the extent of that what happens in autism. In autism, they go to lens at learning about something because they enjoy doing it and they like it. And it's not usually picked up by them. It is the society who picks them out and say, you're obsessed about this thing. It can be football stats. It can be Manchester City or Liverpool. It can be something about science. It can be something about figurines, Legos, fast cars, things like that. You name it, and they will be master at it. When I was growing up, one of my favorite hobbies, end of the school, because my father used to come late in picking me up, is I would count the motorcycles and their brands. Like there at that time in Pakistan, there was Yamaha, Honda, Suzuki, and Kawasaki. So they were the four brands, and I would feel so much pleasure in counting those. At the end of the day, I said, I've seen those many, those many, those many. And then my mind would go into a rabbit hole as to why is it the case? Is it the better quality? Is it better ride? So many different things that comes with it. I used to write the stats of cricketers. Like my stats were better than a lot of cricketing magazines because I would follow each and every country playing cricket, and I would write it in my notebook, and I would be kind of preoccupied with it, listening to radio, updating my stats, reading newspapers, sports section about it, just to update. And I used to feel pleasure in doing that. I was happy doing that. So, it's not obsession. It's a preoccupation. It's a passion that they follow, especially in autism. It brings them to mastery. What you have to realize is people like Albert Einstein and Newton and Thomas Edison, despite of all the failures that they had in early life, like Thomas Edison talks about the bulb, but we don't talk about the other failures that he had reaching up to the bulb. If he had let it go, if he had given it up, if it was not attention to detail, we would not have light. We would not have bulbs. We would not have things to illuminate us in the dark. So it leads to mastery. It leads to upskilling yourself. Again, it leads to a lot of happiness, a lot of grounding for those who are autistic. But the shame, it comes from the society who are seeing them like that. They will never say that, I have this hobby, I'm ashamed of that. They're not. They're very proud of it. And they will talk about it every time they have an opportunity to do so. We are hurling that kind of obsession onto them, that you're obsessive about it. Why do you keep on spending a lot of time on this? What are you going to get out of it?
The preoccupation thing's fascinating. I told this story before. When I was younger, I was preoccupied with, it's quite funny, the stock market. I was fascinated. I won't use the word obsessed. I was preoccupied with the stock market, and I got called weird by my classmates because of it. But when I was preoccupied and I was busy, hyper-focusing on the stock market updates, I was very happy and very at peace. That was where I went to find pleasure, to soothe the anxiety that was there if I integrated with the other kids.
Oh, yes.
So it's very relatable. The people you treat, is there a common thread of insecurity? And what do you think the root of that is?
I think, again, it comes back to things that we've already discussed. If you are been picked on, if you are not understood, if you are ridiculed, if there's expectation and you don't follow the expectation, there's so many different factors to it. If you are asked to read maths and you're not good at maths, but you're good at science, but that does not matter because you're still not good at maths. And every time you get your math results and you're ridiculed about it, the parents are not happy, teachers are not happy. They always write that, they have not reached the potential. Again, a problem with the educational system, a problem with us understanding them, a problem with us not encouraging them to do something different to what they like to pursue. They will develop insecurities about it. They will develop that. And the insecurities leads to low self-esteem. The thing about failure, they're scared of failure, and hence they won't attempt a thing. A lot of the time, they will know so many things, and when you ask them why you have not done it, I said, what if I fail? So we have that incorporated what if into them, because everything has a consequence. If they fail, there will be more things that will be thrown at them, and that will get them more down. So insecurity stems from all those. Plus, people develop anxiety. People develop depression as a result of that. And they become more recluse as a result of that. They don't meet people. They don't meet the potential as a result of that. So everything, when you talk about it, it's so much interconnected. It's not just one line that you have to follow. It is everything that has happened in a very holistic way, in a 360 degrees way, that leads to that situation.
Has there been a change in the stigma towards neurodivergence since you've practiced as a psychiatrist?
Yeah, I think a lot. And I remember when I had my first encounter with the person who was at then diagnosed with Asperger's, and my consultant asked me to go and speak to him. And he said, "Oh, the person is autistic." And my mindset was, "Oh, so is he disabled?" And then all of a sudden he was doing something and just moved his concentration towards me and moved his head and said, "I think you need to learn about autism. Go and read it first and then see the patient." And I was fascinated because that person was an astrophysicist. Blew my mind away in so many different ways, and probably that was the first time I related to somebody like that. I was tearful during the interview, so much, listening to the stories, and I was fascinated, and there has been no going back from there. When I was training, the only place you could do autism assessment was Sheffield, around that area, and we were in Lincolnshire, and in every specialist referral was sent to Sheffield, whereas now we have developed different hubs. We, although not formally training, but people who are neurodivergents are kind of gravitated towards neurodevelopmental conditions, and they're learning it themselves. That there's more traction in autism and ADHD to the level of normalization. Like again, it's going to the other end now, where people are thinking that it is a normality, and people are thinking that, oh, it's a social media trend that we are developing. It's called a TikTok diagnosis now. So, which is again, is going from one extreme where nobody knew about everything to an extreme where it is known so much that people are speculating it to a certain social media trend, which is not the case.
Yeah, it's very true. I think I've spoken before. I think ADHD in particular, but other neurodivergent conditions, if anything, because of the social media content, there's a risk that they can be going through a period of overexposure to the point where actually it's having the opposite effect of what the original cause was, which is over-awareness and therefore a lot of ignorance. And it does wind me up when someone says, because I hear it a lot, everyone has ADHD these days. And it's the, obviously they don't. It's when a neurotypical experiences these symptoms, these traits of ADHD, like forgetting your car keys or zoning out of conversations, because everyone does that from time to time. It's the sort of, it's the wave, it's a small wave, it's the up and down. Whereas when an ADHD person does it, it's the summit of Everest, and then it's the lowest point on earth. It's that continuousness and the extremeness of these swings, which can cause the comorbidities. Unfortunately, people with ADHD are 4 times more likely to take an attempt on their life at some stage. Is everyone 4 times more likely to take an attempt on their own life?
Exactly. And again, how I explain to people is, when I was growing up, our learning was through books and newspapers. My father made me read Reader's Digest at a very young age, Newsweek, Economist. I started studying Economist when I was 12 or 13 years of age. Then came a time where internet prevailed, and then there was social media, and then there were reels, and then we are looking at artificial intelligence. So every generation, now the beta generation has started this year. So alpha generation has stopped, so 2010 to 2024. Every generation has their own way of learning. This is their way of learning. This is the way of learning of Gen Ys, Gen Zs, alpha generation, and now the beta generation. You cannot say something is right or wrong till you have gone deeper into it and known. For example, 2 different newspapers, Guardian or Sun, where you get the information from, the right information from. You have to go and you have to study, and you'll know where you will find the right information from. Same way, there's so many different reels. It imparts a lot of information, a very good information. Then there are other information which is not very pertinent and not very evidence-based to ADHD. It's up to us to decipher what is the right information and what is not, what we have to shut down and what we have to kind of go into and do deeper research about it. So the onus of responsibility is not them. Our attention span is a commodity. They will try to explore it as much as possible to monetize it. But it's up to us to see what we're going through and to make up our mind and with doing more research rather than superficially looking into that.
Regarding the stigma towards these neurodivergent conditions, what would you like to see happen?
Like to see embracing it, not just accepting it, embracing it, that it exists and this is how it is, and we're going to work together towards it. I also feel that there's owner for responsibility on both the groups, neurotypical as well as neurodivergent. As much as neurotypicals has to know about neurodivergence, the neurodivergent should be knowing about the majority that is neurotypical as well. It works both ways. We cannot be calling from a position of entitlement that because we're in minority, but we are special, so you have to learn about me. I don't have to learn about you. That should not be the case. And that's how the integration will take place, where we will learn about the neurotypicals and neurotypicals will learn about us, and it will all come together, creating a mosaic, creating an environment which is so vibrant, which is so amazing, which has so many different perspectives that they bring to the table. And when people start seeing that, I think things will change. But as I said earlier, the most important bit is psychoeducation, educating the communities, educating everybody around us as to what these neurodevelopmental conditions are.
Yeah, no, it's spot on. Have to start with awareness and build from there. I want to talk about the defined differences in an ADHD diagnosis between males and females. But first, I want to draw attention back to the table and understand why Dobby from Harry Potter is your ADHD item. Please explain.
All right. So I'm fascinated with the Harry Potter world. I think it's a very good depiction of neurotypicals and neurodivergent, muggles and wizards. And then in wizards, they're good wizards and they're bad wizards. So which is the case everywhere. So people from different parts of life, they come together to Hogwarts. They're different. They have different strengths. They have been picked up because of those strengths. Some strengths are good, some are not. Some are in developing stages. Some are really superior, and they all combine together, make a community which is so vibrant, which is so different, which thinks so differently from the rest. For me, that's a neurodivergent world. Harry Potter world is a neurodivergent world. And Dobby is a depiction of what an undiagnosed or ADHD is like. It does not understand its strengths. It does things in a different way. Throughout all the movies that he has been in, trying to prevent Harry Potter to going to Hogwarts because his life is in danger by endangering his life. Actually, that happens in the second episode, and he has these powers. And Harry, because of his humility and because of his amazing character and being intelligent, he makes him come out of a very toxic environment where he understands his own powers. And he's so down to earth, and he doesn't realize the strength he has. And then he saves Harry Potter from dying before he dies himself on the beach. So for me, a person who is so skillful, so amazing, so full of surprises, but because of how people see that person, ridicule them, low self-esteem, so low self-confidence, low self-belief, that's the best description of neurodiversity to me.
Yeah, no, that's
in this world as we exist.
Is there a parallel between Dobby getting his freedom and getting the sock to somebody who is trapped behind uncertainty, getting their diagnosis?
It's the moment where, and I have seen it not in neurodivergent services. I used to work in crisis teams, a lot of crisis situation we used to deal with, and 30% of people were undiagnosed autism and ADHD. They would come with oh, the person has got depression, person has got anxiety, person. And once you started talking to them, you realize that they are neurodivergent. And once you tell them, that's a light bulb moment for them, like it's a sock given to them. I said, I'm free. I can understand myself better. And then leads to a pathway which leads to their own self-discovery and their own reflection, then their insight, and they strengthen, not necessarily getting a diagnosis because the waiting lists are that long, but again, giving a string of hope to them that they hang on to till they are diagnosed and they learn more about it and going through that journey of diagnosis. For me, that moment is that shock when somebody tells them that, I don't think you're depressed, but there might be something, you might be autistic, you might be having problems with ADHD, you have a lot of features of ADHD. That's the shock for me.
It's fascinating. It's a powerful explanation. I'm going to watch Harry Potter soon, and I will, have a different lens as how I'm looking at Dobby through. So thank you, Khurram. I want to do the ADHD agony aunt section every week.
Yeah.
It's called the washing machine of woes because my ADHD item is a washing machine because I always forget my clothes in the machine.
Yep.
Do you forget your clothes in the machine?
My AirPods have taken showers in the washing machine at least 6 or 7 times. And I leave a lot of stuff in the fridge.
Okay, so that's the ADHD tax too, because I imagine that would have broken them.
No,
they survived the washing machine.
They survived the washing machine. Like,
wow.
This is
what a good.
There might be neurodivergent. You never know.
Shout out, yeah. I always forget my, the smell of wet clothes is quite a common feature in my flat. But I have been using the Tiimo app, and I have been getting a lot better at remembering. But I ask my ADHD chatter Instagram community for their woes every week, and I put one in the machine, and I read it to see if there's any wisdom from the guest.
Yep.
This week, someone has asked, I'm a teacher and a pupil who is 8 years old keeps leaving class due to panic attacks and they're falling behind. Is there an explanation for this response within her? And how can we harness her creativity as a school?
I think if somebody is having a panic attack because they're in a classroom, I see it as sensory overload. I think the first thing they need to understand is to ask the pupil as to why they're leaving the classroom. What is it and why are they having a panic attack? What is causing that panic attack? Because in my practice, what I've seen is usually in these scenarios, it's a sensory overload. Because distraction in ADHD is completely different to sensory overload in autism. Distraction is curiosity. Distraction is moving from one thing to another and being fascinated with it. Whereas sensory overload in a person is as if there's a physical thing piercing your ears if there's noise there. That there's a physicality to that. If the smell is too much, then it can make them gag. It can make them, if people are getting closer to them when they're not used to, it gives them a very strange and scratchy feeling. So that needs to be explored further as to why the person is leaving, why the person is having panic attacks, looking into how busy the classroom is, how can they accommodate, for example, giving the loop earphones, or making them sit a bit distant to the other children, either in the front or in the back, wherever they feel confident, or asking them about how they would like to do that. Because most of the time, what we do not ask is, when it's children, we assume things. We should be asking, having proper conversation with them as to what they would like. That would help them explore it around those lines.
No, it's fascinating, and it's truly particularly interesting for me. I had my first panic attack in a classroom when I was 6, and I've told this story a lot, but it's essentially I was very happy at the back of the classroom, minding my own business. The teacher put me on the spot. All of the other kids turned around and looked at me, and in that moment, I had a panic attack and I left the classroom. I've always put that down to pressure. But I've never looked at it through the lens of overstimulation. Yeah. Can attention be a form of stimulation?
Can be, yes. All of a sudden, all eyes on you, and you're expected. And again, you're expected to give the right answers because you have this belief that if you do something wrong, then you will be ridiculed for that later on as well. And people will make fun of you. In order to do that, you have to be perfect and looking for perfection, looking for the perfect answer or perfect response. Or if you have inattention and all of a sudden you have not listened to what have been said and you have been asked that question and you're clueless about it, that's a very similar scenario where you will not want to be in that scenario because people will ridicule you for that. And if you already experience it from your own experience.
That's fascinating. Yeah, I'm always looking for explanations. And that makes a lot of sense. As I mentioned, do you have any defined differences between the diagnosis of ADHD between male and female?
Yeah, I think it's quite obvious. When you're looking at a male presentation, you're looking at a lot of combined presentation, which is a mixture of hyperactive, impulsive, and inattentive features. People who say that hyperactive, impulsive type is depictive of male, it's one of the rarest kind. Like it's literally 2 to 3% of population, because even with children who are diagnosed with boys who are diagnosed with hyperactive, impulsive type, there's a very good chance that as they grow older, the hyperactivity, impulsivity decreases, and the diagnosis also already dissipates. Sometimes combined ADHD type becomes inattentive ADHD type in boys. So now the combined type is depictive of male, and then the female is more towards the inattentive side of it. So again, it's a very completely different description of a person, more away from the stereotype that we see. When we see a stereotype, we see a male, we see a boy, we see somebody who's jumping around, doing a lot of commotion. When boys do it, it is not very obvious because boys are boys. It's like a boyish trait. Whereas if females do it, it becomes very obvious. If female who have got combined ADHD, they become very prominent. But inattentive type, in a way, society is telling us that females have to be shy, females have to be polite, and females have to speak in a certain way. They cannot be rude, they cannot be disruptive. And this is something that is dictated by the society, by the norms that we have created for ourselves. So in order to conform with those norms, this female do a lot of mirroring. They do a lot of masking in order for them not to be counted out. And this is exactly what happens. Whereas with boys, because there's a belief that boys have to be like this, they are active, they can do things and they can get away with things, even when they're disruptive. A lot of it is like, yeah, they're males, they're boys. And in females, because it's so much pressure on them, it leads to a lot of anxiety, it leads to a lot of depression, it leads to a lot of controlling the thing, leading to eating disorder diagnosis, their own maladaptive coping mechanisms that can take them through the early years, but it becomes very obvious later on in their life. Self-harming behaviors, because they're unable to express themselves. If they express themselves, they will be called different. They'll be called broken. They'll be called weird, an outlier. So of all those pressures, the societal expectations, and the way they present themselves, hence they differ. Anxiety and depression is more prevalent as a comorbidity in women who have got ADHD. In males, it is the case, but not as prevalent as that in females.
Gosh, I mean, you tell a heartbreaking story of the female journey through the process.
Yeah.
We speak a lot on this podcast and in the community about getting a diagnosis later in life and looking back through this new awareness, this new lens of ADHD, and suddenly so much makes sense. What could have been different if I had known? But on the other side of the page, do you think someone can be too young to receive a ADHD diagnosis?
I think I bring a lot of science when it comes to these things, scientific evidence. Brain develops massively. Brain multiplies. The neuron multiply massively till 5 years of age. Like from million neurons, where it becomes 3 or 4 or 5 billions of neurons over a period of 5 years. They can be, for example, autism on the books can be diagnosed as early as 18 months of age, whereas ADHD can be diagnosed around 4 to 5 years of age. You cannot medicate a child till they're 6 years of age unless there are exceptions around it. I believe that at least they should be 4 to 5 years of age, whether it is autism, whether it is ADHD, because the brain is developing and there's a possibility that once the brain reaches its certain summit of replication, and after it starts pruning, those behaviors might go away. So you have to be mindful of that. You might have to be mindful of the brain developing, the developmental stages, the milestones, and be diagnosed at the right time. I've not come across anybody who I have medicated when they are less than 5 years of age. I wait for the right time to do that. So although the book says something, but you have to use your sensibility, you have to use your common sense, the environment around you, where the child is coming from, and the severity of the features that you see in that child.
Are there some common misdiagnoses of ADHD and autism that could cause it to go missed for a little bit longer?
Absolutely. Most common one is emotionally unstable personality disorder. That is now complex trauma in ICD-11. They've changed the kind of the title, the nomenclature to it, because emotionally unstable personality disorder, it feels like you're blaming somebody for the dysregulation of their emotions. So UPD was something that was very common to be diagnosed. Cyclothymia is another diagnosis. I believe it to be quite redundant because cyclothymia is like bipolar, they say. It's like a younger sibling of bipolar, but they have the features, but they do not meet the criteria for bipolar, but they're treated the same way. So for me, it does not, I cannot gauge that in my mind. My autistic mind does not believe in that container. I believe that a lot of people with cyclothymia have got ADHD or severity of ADHD that has led to that. Bipolar affective disorder is something that people can associate with. Social anxiety disorder is something, or a pure stress, a stress of the situation, or adjustment going from one scenario to another are the most common features that you see as misdiagnosed, mismanaged with ADHD.
From your experience, what do you think? This is a general question, but what do you think neurodivergent people are looking for from the world, from their relationships, from their work?
I think from the world they need to be listened to. They need not to be shut up every time that they open their mouth. Just because they are telling you something different, it does not mean that it's bad, because the world is petrified of anybody coming up with new idea. They initially call it bad, and then they embrace it because eventually that starts to work. From their relationship, they want to be understood. They want to be understood as why they do things in a certain way, in a certain order. Why they have to get up, why they have to move around, why they have to stim, why they do not make eye contact with people. Why is it that they are not social with people? That needs to be understood. And overall, it needs to be embraced. For example, in workplaces, people should identify those, not for the reason of getting productivity, because at the moment what is happening is, and I believe this is manipulation, that bigger firms are hiring neurodivergents because they work effectively. They're not there to help them because it will help their productivity. Their mental health, their well-being is not the center stone of all of this. And I think that needs to change. They're different kind of people. You have to understand them. For example, if somebody keeps on missing things or misspelling things despite of being told, or sending you emails without getting the attachments in, I think you need to be aware of that as to what is happening with the person, whether there's something going on at uh, in their personal lives. Are they distraught because of something, or this is something which might be pointing out towards ADHD or dyslexia or something on those lines. So making themselves aware will help them identify these differences, and by identifying these differences, they will be able to help those people rather than pointing fingers. One of the most common questions a person with ADHD autism asked me as to, shall I disclose it to my employer? I said, it's really up to you, because I cannot tell you. There are employers who are very supportive of it, help you, but then other organizations, they can scapegoat you. They can blame you for things that has happened, and you'll be an easy target for them. So it is for you to ascertain how your employers are, and then decide whether you're going to disclose it to them or not.
I think falling back on that strong ADHD intuition in cases like that is so important. To really trust your gut,
Yes,
and to look at it on a case-by-case basis.
absolutely.
Because I'd love to be able to say, yes, disclose
Yes,
and ask for accommodations and everything will be wonderful. But the reality is so much stigma,
Oh,
bullying,
absolutely.
discrimination
Absolutely.
still is there.
there is. Like, I openly say that of autism and ADHD, but it has taken me years to do that. I'm in a position where I can do that, and I'm doing things that people appreciate of. But again, there were times when I used to do things and not appreciated. And if I told them that this is the case, and they would say, "Oh, that's the reason you're like this." So we have to be very, very careful. We live in a very different world. We live in a very ignorant world. Do not know about those things, and for them, it's the factual information. And I always believe that it's not about knowing things; it's about understanding it and putting yourself in those perspectives as to how you're going to be doing if you had that condition.
A topic that comes up time and time again on this podcast is addiction. What is the link between ADHD, autism, and addiction?
There is a link, definitely. Like, if you look at the evidence base, 30% of people with addiction, they do have underlying ADHD. Autism is far away from addiction, I think, because they are in the air of caution, so they don't get indulgent things, because autism is about the fear of not knowing the unknown. They need to know all the possibilities before they jump into a situation. Drugs is something that they don't know what's going to happen. Are they going to feel? They're going to feel good? Are they going to feel bad? Are they going to be experiencing a psychotic episode? Are they going to have an epiphany? Something on those lines. So autism stays away from it. Addiction definitely has a strong link with ADHD. I've seen a lot of people who self-medicate because of that, because their mind is going so fast. Well, one of the things when I was learning ADHD, my mentor, Dr. Peter Mason, he's based in Liverpool, one of the most amazing guys we have ever met, completely neurodivergent, an amazing teacher. And he said that one of the litmus tests of doing an ADHD assessment, if somebody says that they're using stimulant medication, they have misused it, ask them what stimulant medication is. If it is cocaine or amphetamines, and ask them, how does it make you feel? A lot of the time they will say, well, it has no effect on me, or I feel that I'm very clear. I'm able to do things, whereas everybody is climbing on the walls. I'm able to kind of bring my thought process together and do a lot of things that have been incomplete at that time. So using cocaine is kind of litmus test to knowing that a person has got ADHD or not. This is, and I have used that litmus test, and in 70% of the cases that stands true. So a lot of people who use it, not use it because they're addicted to it, they use it because it slows the mind down, it gives them clarity, it makes them, the things go away. Your mind going at 100 miles an hour, you're not able to sleep. A lot of people use alcohol because it helps them to sleep. Initial insomnia is a problem in ADHD because your thought process is going so much and you're thinking about so much that you're unable to sleep. Your brain is still stimulated enough. Then there are behavioral addictions like social media, gaming. both the groups, autism and ADHD, they tend to gravitate towards it for different reasons. In autism, it is because they like to socialize, but they cannot socialize. The burden of socialization is too much. They get tired. They don't know what to do. They're not into small talk. They have rather deeper conversation than superficial conversation. Hence, they create a world, a reality, parallel reality for them, where they're socializing with people online. They're creating communities online. They are the leaders in those communities online. But their reality is completely different to the reality of a non-autistic person. They're happy being there. And they gravitate towards gaming and they gravitate towards social media because this is a way of bringing kind of normality to the situation. Whereas ADHD gravitate towards gaming and social media because it's dopamine hitting. Platform keeps on changing. They get the dopamine hits. They need the stimulation, and hence they stick to it because gaming gives them concentration. That's the thing that most of the time the gamers will tell you, that they have not able to concentrate on anything. But when it comes to gaming, it does, because changing platform, it means that dopamine is there all the time. It's hitting, and they're getting the dopamine hits, unable to concentrate, complete the stage, go on to the next one, have a challenge, and anything challenges. It's good for ADHD. So definitely there's a link there.
The gaming piece is fascinating because during COVID, I, like many people, started playing my Xbox, and I really got preoccupied with my Xbox to the point where it was becoming quite problematic. I would wake up first thing in the morning, I turned it on and I played it for hours, and I did this for months and months and months. And I played because it gave me, I can look back now, dopamine. I was addicted to the rush. I played it because it gave me a massive buzz. Whereas I have a friend who plays computer games every day still. And having spoken to him, I think he plays computer games for a very different reason. For him, it doesn't give him a buzz, or it doesn't give him any excitement. It just gives him a calm, a peace. And he gets very anxious when he's not allowed to play the computer games, or if it's withdrawn from him. So it's interesting you say that. It's almost, you can see the different motivations and the different rationale towards why you're drawn towards that computer game.
Oh, yes.
I hyperfocus a lot on this podcast. When I have a new hobby, something will come into my mind and I have to know the answer. So I go on Google and I go down this rabbit hole. But what I find is if it's interrupted for whatever reason, if I'm pulled out of it forcibly, if someone wants to talk to me, I can get very angry. What's happening in the mind of an ADHD person when a hyperfocus is interrupted?
Now, the hyperfocus is like sustained attention. An ADHD person, in ADHD, it happens for so many different reasons. For example, they're lacking behind a deadline, they have to do a deadline. Procrastinate, leading to a crisis, leading to hyperfocus. This is exactly what the pattern is. When your dopamine and norepinephrine is supposed to be released, it's not released. It reached a crisis situation, which release every possible hormone in your body, along with adrenaline, noradrenaline, dopamine, and it helps you do that. Now, when you're in that zone, you came to very zone in a very difficult situation. It's a last resort. You have to finish something. If somebody kind of distracts you, you know that your attention, once broken, it is very difficult to pick up the thread again. And there's a very good chance that you might not be able to complete that thing. Hence, that frustration, irritability comes in. And it is different from the attention span, the sustained attention span in autism, because a lot of the time, hyperfocus is related to both autism and ADHD. Whereas hyperfocus is, yes, it is ADHD related. It is driven by the release of norepinephrine and dopamine. There's a lot of incentivization about it. If you don't do it, there are consequences. You might fail your exams. You have to retake the exams. There's a deadline. If you finish, you're not going to get the promotion. You're having a probation and you don't do it, then it will be extended promotion or you will be fired from the job. so many different things, or something that interests you. But again, if something that interests you doesn't last for a very long time unless you require stimulation. Whereas in autism, it's not hyperfocus, it's sustained attention. Because they don't do it as incentivization. They do it because they're happy, they're at peace, they enjoy doing it. And hence, they continue to do it. They can break themselves off it and then go back to it. They can take gaps in it. So that's the difference between hyperfocus and sustained attention in autism and ADHD. And a lot of people, they confuse hyperfocus. Hyperfocus does not happen in autism unless it is AuDHD. And for autism, I use the word sustained attention, or preoccupation with something, or having a passionate going at something that keeps them entangled in that situation for hours on end. But it is not because of stress. There's no incentive around it. They're simply enjoying it and they're loving it.
And do you have any methods on how to stop your own addiction or to try to stop someone else's?
Addiction is a very broad category. Like, it can be alcohol, it can be substances, it can be behavioral addiction. So first of all, you have to understand where the addiction is coming from. The alcohol they're using, it is because they like the taste of it. Some people do, and they continue, or they like the effect of it as to what happens, or they're using it as self-medication. A lot of the drugs are the same. Is it peer pressure around it? Is it in certain situations they do that? Is it when they are trying to socialize with other people just because they are trying to mask themselves, they use it for that? So there are so many different reasons. So unless you know the reason, you won't be able to stop somebody. I have learned in my life that nobody can change anybody's point of view. The point of view is going to change once you decide to change your own point of view because of what you have experienced. A lot of the time, it's not about imposing things on neurodivergent people or people who are suffering point of view. It's about having a comment and leaving that comment with that person for them to reflect on it. So that it seems that you're caring, but you're not wanting them to change because you think it's the right thing. They should know that it's the right thing for them as well at the same time. Again, same is the case with behavioral addiction, with social media, with gaming. It's about finding out what is giving them that traction. Why are they going into a social media world? Why are they going into a gaming world? I had developed my expertise around social media and screen time as well over a period of time. And I tell them that it is worth finding something that can replace it. For example, if you're asking somebody to come off the social media and they have been spending 6 hours, you should have 6 hours of other activities to replace it. If you don't have anything to replace it, there's a very good chance that they will go back to them. And I'm talking about more or less children. And adults, we have got too many activities. We can indulge ourselves in other activities as well. And gaming is the same case as well. What is bringing them the stimulation? Can you replace that stimulation with something else which is stimulating for them as well? In a different scenario, it can be sports, it can be going out, it can be socializing. It can be even playing games with them together. For example, if they are on that console, you can be the other person and they can have a 2-player game rather than playing online. So as such, there is no specific answers, but it is very situation driven. Because being a psychiatrist, I've got so many different scenarios of people getting into addiction, and you want them to come off it, but they cannot come off it a lot of the time because they're so used to it. They're dependent on it. Their body is dependent on it, especially when it comes to alcohol and opioids or benzodiazepines. But there are other kind of addiction, for example, where it is cocaine. The addiction is for a completely different reason. It is for stimulation. If you can replace that stimulation with something else that is stimulating, if they're not medicated properly for the ADHD, they can look into those scenarios as well.
People with ADHD tend to have this interesting perception of time. Things are either are now or not now.
Yeah.
And through the context of addiction, I had a guest on called Dr. James Cousteau. He suggested this as a theory. When you are trying to remain sober, or you're trying to not take drugs, or you're trying to not gamble anymore, or whatever it is for you, because your reason for stopping, your rock bottom, isn't in your now,
Yeah.
you forget about it. When the opportunity comes again to drink, to gamble, to smoke, whatever, you've forgotten the reason why you stop, so you do it again. Do you think someone's perception of time can have an impact on their ability to remain away from their addiction?
I look at it completely differently. I look at the addiction as to why they got involved in the very first place. What is the reason behind it? What is their purpose to life? What you have to understand is neurodivergent people, whether it's autistic or ADHD or any other neurodevelopmental condition, there has to be a purpose to live. Do they have the purpose? Are they in a job? Are they in an occupation that they're enjoying or they're thriving or they want to achieve? I've seen people who have had alcohol problems, who had issues, but just because they found a purpose in their life, they gave up on it. So it's very important for me. It is important that they need to have a purpose of life. It is way above, especially in neurodivergent population. It's beyond the obvious, and it is that situation is that you give them a reason to live and you give a reason to thrive, a thing that they're interested in, you will see a completely different changed person. And I've seen that so many times in my life. Give them a purpose, you give them a direction, you help them identify it. In a year's time, they're a completely different person. Patients have come to me and said, I drink alcohol, I was on weed, I was in my parents' place, I did not have a relationship. A year down the line, the moment they started to take medication, they have got clarity, they moved out of their parents' accommodation, they found a job, they're in a relationship, they've stopped drinking alcohol and weed without any help, without any assistance for addiction services. They found a purpose of life.
Something to live for.
Something to live for. And that's what the human beings are. Like, we need a purpose to live, especially neurodivergent. You need to have a reason to live, a reason that you enjoy at the same time. If they're doing a job, it is a job that they enjoy and they relish, rather than something which is 9 to 5 and it stops at as it strikes 5. No, they're not, because they're more flexible than that and they want more reason to live. So for me, this is how I deal with it when it comes to neurodevelopmental condition co-occurring with addictions. And then I've seen people who are addicted to it and they need help. So I have to stop medication, seek help in order to overcome that addiction and to come to a state where they are ready to do it. If somebody says they like alcohol and they don't want it and they don't see it as a problem, no matter how hard you try, you won't be able to make them part from it.
We have a closing tradition on the podcast where I deliver to you a letter that was written by the previous guest, and it's 3 rules to live by. Here is the letter. I'll pass it to you. If you could kindly open the letter and read the 3 rules.
So, always connect symptoms of neurodiversity with hidden potential. Focus on comparing the quality of life of those that others have written off. There's no greater source of purpose. Know that mental health can be increased naturally and permanently to achieve mental strength and resilience.
Nice 3 little nuggets there of wisdom.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And shall I be leaving with my three on of mine as well?
If you could, after we finished, if you were kind enough to give us your 3 rules to live by, then it will pass on to the next guest. But Khurram, thank you so much. This has been truly fascinating.
Thank you very much, Alex, for this opportunity. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Do you remember to take your reusable shopping bags when you go to the supermarket?
Oh, never. My wife does.
Your wife does.
every time.
Do you have I've got a cupboard in my kitchen that's overflowing with them. Do you have that? Is that a staple of your?
Yep. There's an area, and again, usually it's the bags that I bring.
Yeah.
My wife sticks with certain few. Every time I go out supermarkets, I have got more bags to space with.
That tax, isn't it? It's the
yes.
20, 30p bag again. Domain names. How many do you have?
I've got one. It's mentasirena.com, so it's just one.
Just one. Okay,
Just
so
one.
The autism one there.
Yep, exactly. Because I'm sticking to that.
What's the most impulsive thing you've ever done?
Most impulsive thing that I've ever done. I left my exam. I was doing my 4th year medicine, and there's a friend who was visiting. He was in another city, and he was supposed to be leaving in the evening. Usually, what they do is, and I was preparing for my viva for pathology, and usually nobody wants to go first, so I had to meet him. It was in my mind. I would never, despite of having exams. So what I did was I was the first one. I went in, did my viva as quickly as possible, got into the car and disappeared for 10 hours. And my family was looking for me. At that time, I didn't have any mobile phones. When I came back, my father was really, really unhappy about that. And he did not know till this date that I'd gone out of city when I was having my exam, because that was kind of 4th year exams, really important, really stressful. And I was like, I care about the exams. I have to get it done as soon as possible, and I have to go and meet my friend.
Did you give them an explanation as to where you had been for 10 hours?
Lied.
Do you like voice notes, or are you a text message man?
I'm getting used to the idea of voice notes now. I more rely on text because, and again, it keeps on shifting in different situation. Especially when I'm driving, I like voice notes, and again, if normally I like text notes.
Do you have a notebook?
Loads of notebooks. Like again, I buy them in dozens, and then I leave it behind. But again, I've finally found a solution to it. I use a writing pad called Remarkable. It's one of the amazing tools that has happened to me. It's like carrying 10, 15, 20 different notebooks together. It has got an app everywhere in my phone as well as in my laptop. So whatever I write, whether it's patient's notes or whether it's my leadership things or masters or public speaking, everything is there. That's it. It goes with me everywhere. And there have been times when I have left it behind, which happens a lot with us, ADHDers. I feel lost.
I'm a terrible one for keeping my flat tidy. What's the state of your flat? Like your wardrobe, your clothes, are they hung up or are they on the floor?
Yeah, I've got a very organized wife who does not let me come near things. If that was not the case, they would have piles and piles of things. My study is somewhere where nobody else goes apart from me and my boys. My wife says that it's a no-go area for her, and it's not in the right state most of the times. I do the cleaning, and that it lasts for a few days, and then it goes back to its messy self where everything is everywhere. It's in piles.
Yeah. Does your mind, even though it's a mess, do you know where everything is?
Yes.
Yeah.
Most of the times.
Yeah.
Unless somebody has moved it.
Yeah. Then apart from Dobby,
Yeah.
what other fictional characters do you think might have a neurodivergent condition?
Mask.
The Mask.
The Mask.
Yeah. Jim Carrey.
Definitely Jim Carrey. Definitely ADHD. I think Severus Snape.
Okay. And autistic.
Autistic. Very much. Even when he speaks, it's a very monotoned way. Other than that, I think all the Harry Potter characters, Lona, she's called the loony one, Lona the loony, and again she talks in a very monotone way. She's very much autistic, and she brings about the facts out of nowhere. random facts, and she is very, very, very kind of different to the rest of the team. And again, even in that world of neurodivergence, she stands out quite a lot.
What about Dumbledore? Do you think he's neurotypical or neurodivergent?
I think he was neurotypical. He had every T's ticked and I's dotted. So for everybody, I think he was not. I would not see him as a neurodivergent person. Definitely Harry Potter, definitely Ron, definitely Hermione.
The whole Weasley family seemed quite
The whole quirky.
ADHD, would
Exactly.
you say?
A kind of mixture of ADHD and autism, I would say.
Yeah, I see that. Especially the dad. He's very
Yeah,
driven, but
very
also
driven,
quite
exactly.
clumsy and disorganized. This has been fascinating. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alex.